welcome to the second episode of Road to Growth, an entrepreneur's journey to raise funds. Today, we have the opportunity to dive into an investor's perspective and to get a financial advisor one's. And I welcome to talk about these subjects Diane Dupré and Éric de la Fortelle. First, I'm going to let you introduce yourselves for our audience to better understand your backgrounds, and then we're going to dive into the subjects.
Thank you very much. So my name is Diane Dupré. I'm working for UBS. So I started my career at UBS 8 years ago now. We launched 5 years ago a private financing market team advising entrepreneurs to raise money on the private markets. It's a mondial franchise, and for us, it's very important, actually. And we decided this year to launch this franchise here in Paris. We are assisting entrepreneurs from the Series A to Series C.
Beautiful. Éric?
Thank you, Aline. My name is Éric de la Fortelle. I'm the managing partner in France for a fund called Cathay Health, part of Cathay Capital, the investment company. And personally, I have been in investment 10 years. But before that, I was 15 years in operations in pharma and biotech, so drug discovery, drug development. And before that, I was for 10 years an academic scientist.
Thank you for this introduction. Before we start, maybe a few words about the actual investing environment that's evolved quite a lot with the different crises. From your perspective, could you give us a bit of a recap of what's going on and how do you perceive it?
Yeah, sure. So actually, when I started my career in private markets, so it was approximately 5 years ago when we started this team in London, the market was totally different. Interest rate was very low. Actually, the money was very easy to raise and was cheap. So people were like going from like quite, safe asset to quite risky asset, which is like the venture capitals. So funds were able to raise a lot of money and funds were able to invest a lot of money in startups. Right now, the market has changed. So the money is now, more expensive. And so it's more difficult for entrepreneurs to raise money. So there is like a change in the environment. Before, company was focusing more on growth, burning cash, expanding very quickly. And now they are more focusing on how I can get a market profitable. So what is my path to profitability? The investors are spending much more time in due diligence. There are a lot of scrutiny of how you can find actually a sustainable business. So we can see really a change in the environment. Just like to give you one number, actually in France, when you take the new fund survey, the fundraising have decreased by 60%, like in the first semester. So it's a huge decrease, and you took the reference is 2022, which was already quite a slowdown in the market. So yes, it's harder, but we can also still see very interesting startup. I think now the entrepreneurs are much more cautious and much more, they understand better the environment. So they are raising less money, but they are focusing more on how I'm going to manage my cash burn and how I'm going to develop something more sustainable.
From a venture capitalist perspective, what would you say on that?
I would very much agree with Diane about adaptability. We have a choice. We can either join the chorus of whiners, say, oh, times are hard. That's very negative. That's useless. What we can do is adapt to the current situation. And for our fund, we were, in a way, happy or lucky that one of our keywords from the start, from 2 years ago, which was value-based care, is actually making us better adapted to the world to come, because it's there to stay, and in a way, it's a good thing. I explain myself. When a few years ago, any investment in healthcare in the most expensive, beautiful science was a go. That was a bit of a waste of money. What healthcare needs today is not the $1 million drug that will cure 200 people. That's useful. What's more useful is the value drug which will save time and money in the health system and cure millions of people. That's what the world needs. And the current crisis is really changing the focus from beautiful, expensive projects to equally beautiful, value-based projects.
So what do investors look for when they're approaching a deep tech company?
So like more broadly, what is important when investors look at an opportunity or deal, they are going to look at the markets. So what is what we say TAM, so the total addressable markets. So how big is it and how you can tackle and take like part of the market. So that is the first point. Then what is your solution? What is your USP? So how you are going to find actually a way to solve this problem and to develop something unique versus a competitor, for instance. Then obviously it's the team. What is the background of the team? What the team have done in the past? With their ability to deliver. And then for so your question is more for a deep tech, but if we take, for example, a software company, you have like a lot of KPIs to monitor quite quickly. So for example, what is your CAC? What is your LTV? Your recurring revenue? This kind of stuff, which you have like a bit less with deep tech company because obviously you go to the market a bit later. And I would say, like, again, what is under scrutiny from investor right now is your path to profitability. So how you will make like a business profitable in the coming years. And potentially, what is your exit strategy? So is it more like a strategic or is more like an IPO? And, and I think we will speak about that later, but the investor have like a time frame when they invest. So you need to take that into consideration when you raise money as well.
Talking about the time frame investors are looking in, usually they mean to exceed within 5 to 7 years. You talked about value creation and the fast pace companies need to reach and focus in doing that.
Yeah, there are incompressible needs for investors to exit because the LPs give us money for 10 years typically. So we need to have the fastest companies exiting in 3 years and then the slowest exiting in 7 years to fulfill our promise to our own investors called the LPs. This said, even though this is the rule of the game, what we really want to see is a path to value creation. Exiting quickly is only one of the goals. The other goal is to build something that really makes sense in terms of value. And I would say value has two faces. One face is how beautiful, innovative, and differentiated the technology is. And the other face of the same coin is, does it fit a need? And in the health sector, it's particularly important because understanding the needs of medical professionals, doctors, surgeons, nurses, etc., is very difficult, especially for tech people. It's two worlds that really coexist, but don't speak to each other. And we feel our role in life for the Cathay Health Fund is to make these two worlds integrate, discuss, understand each other.
There's also a question for companies that invest into the transition, the ecological transition, and try to implement sustainable models. The time to investment is much longer because there's hardware, there's potentially software. So from an investor perspective or financial advisor, what type of funding exists for long-term investment?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very good question, actually. So as mentioned, Éric, most of the VC funds have LPs on the back. So you have like a pressure in terms of time frame. But actually you have like different type of investor and different like a pocket of money. If you take, for example, sovereign wealth funds, they are like more like passion long-term investor. So for example, we see a lot of Middle East sovereign wealth funds investing in hardware or asset-heavy business. So if you take QIA, Adia, Mubadala, they can invest for 10, like 15 years without a problem because they don't have like any LPs. You have pension fund. If you have like the big, for example, Canadian CDPQ, OTPP, it's the same. They are like a very long time frame to invest. You have also all the family offices, which are like more and more like interesting in VC, in sustainability, in investing actually in the transition. So I think that is also a very interesting pocket of capital. And you have also like, for example, BPI in France. And you have the strategic. So the strategic are particularly interesting because they can open you the door actually to a lot of a very interesting network and a big network. and they can potentially be an interesting exit for the coming years. So yes, you have VCs, but you have also you can diversify your type of capital and your type of investor at your cap table.
That is essential. And thank you for the panorama you just gave us. Would you like to add?
Yeah, I'd like to add a point complementary to this one. I think that it is possible to find patient 20 years investors. I actually think it's an exception, and it may not be healthy. Because in these 20 years, if you take it from the white page to a very successful product, 20 years roughly, okay, there will be 3 phases. One phase is technological development. Next phase is go-to-market. And last phase is growth. I don't think the investor skills, with exceptions of course, for these 3 phases will be the same. So it's much better, if possible, to have a seed Series A investor for the first one, Series B, C for the second one, growth investor like private equity for the third one. The big question then becomes, how does the handover happen? Are there a common understanding of risk and rewards at the handover from early investors to go-to-market investors? We are a go-to-market investor, but go-to-market investors to growth investors. Do they understand, know each other enough, and can they speak the same language so that everyone gets their value creation recognized and their needs fulfilled? That, to me, that's the bigger question.
Yeah.
When we talked with the different entrepreneurs, a lot of them seem to be industrial startups that have very heavy materials in terms of hardware, very innovative software. It's a bit harder from the investor's perspective because the risk is sometimes double, or it mitigates the risk to have both. What's your take on investing on hardware and software companies that has both in their business model?
Yeah, again, a very interesting question. I think the last years, the focus was more on software because you can scale very quickly, go to the market quickly, iterate, generate some revenue quickly in the market. But right now, actually, we can see that investors are looking to more tangible assets. You have still both, type of investors, but it's reassuring when you have proper assets actually. And when you see, actually, I was looking the biggest raise in France since the beginning of the year, and it's not software company. The biggest raise, actually, it's Vercor. So it's almost 1 billion, and they are building factories. The second one is Insects. They are building factories as well. The other one is Ledger. So you have a software part and a hardware part. So you can see that the appetite of the market actually is there for investors, not for all of them, but it's quite interesting to see that.
Indeed.
I would tend to say that software always, without exception, always goes with hardware. So you're going to tell me, no, there are pure software companies. I would say in that case, the hardware is the customer. But the customer seems to be, for some applications, saturated with software. And it becomes interesting to have a bundle of hardware and software. I'll take the example of robotic surgery. You could think that one company develops the software, the computer vision, all the gizmos, artificial intelligence, and the other one develops the robots. And we have 2 companies in that field. We've talked to them and they say, that's nonsense. The software must be so well adapted, so well integrated into the hardware that for us, at least for our application, both have to go together and nobody else is capable to do software for our robot. Therefore, there's an obligation to do both in parallel. So the hardware being slower is driving the timelines, but the software needs to adapt at every step of the development.
Optimal transition towards intellectual property. How do you look at it?
To us, it's absolutely necessary. In highly technical fields, intellectual property is your protection against richer copycats. So if you prove a concept that a type of robot, for instance, one of our companies has a robot without motorization, complete new view of doing robots. It's the surgeon that actually moves the robot rather than an engine, makes the robot much more solid, much easier. Yes, but that principle cannot be protected. What can be protected is the type of brakes that optimize this new functioning. Without this IP, the competitors hear, oh, that's a really good idea. Let's copy it. Let's put 50 million on this idea, and our company is toast. So we are very, very stringent to make sure their patents are the absolute world-class patent technology to write them, to make them watertight. Otherwise, the company's in trouble.
Anything you'd like to add on the idea?
Yeah, so I think that is very true for like when you have like hardware and something like you develop very unique. But when you take like software company, for instance, some of them the goal is to be the faster, and you don't have like a tangible actually asset. So you need to go fast to go to the market, and so reiterate. So some like entrepreneurs are going to stay in the garage and try to do like the best product ever, but actually they need to go to the market to get the feedback of customer, and it's the best actually things they can do. So I think it's really depending what you are developing.
Okay, and take the adjustment, the feedbacks to
exactly to improve your service,
improve the products. We've talked about the technology, about the environment. Now, if we talk about the founder himself, when you invest in a company, you also invest in a person. How about if the founder is already talking about his exit timeframe? Is that something you see as scary? Is that something you're open to talk about? Do you make him feel comfortable to approach and tackle this subject?
Founders come in very many shapes and psychologies. I would like to change two things about your question. One, I'd like to talk about she, because we have actually in our portfolio more female founders than male founders. And secondly, I'd like to talk about them, because in the skills where we operate, the interface between tech and healthcare, having just one founder is almost impossible, because very few people have a deep understanding of tech and engineering on the one hand, and of healthcare on the other hand. So we much prefer companies that have a duo of founder, one being a surgeon and the other one being an engineer. It could be a nurse and a techie or a software programmer, it doesn't matter. But having these two skills, having these two people really understand each other, and that's my advice for any of the startups listening to this, don't think you know it all. Try to map the skills necessary for the long term of your company. And if 2 founders, 3 founders are necessary, not 3 people who think the same, 3 people who have very different skills and can work with each other, that's the optimal situation.
So in my view, when a founder wants to exit relatively quickly, is not necessarily a very good sign to give to investors, because you want, especially at the beginning, you want to have like a strong team and to show you are here for the long term and you are going to build a project and a company. But if, for example, a founder wants to do like a small cash out after like 3-4 years because he wants to buy a flat or whatever, it could be acceptable. But I think it's important to show that you are here for the long term, you are like delivering on your project, you believe in your project. But after like 5 years or 7 years, if you are not the right, because it's difficult to be a CEO, it's very, very different when you're a CEO of a small startup and when you're a CEO of a company generating revenue and like very established. And sometimes it's also the way to step down and maybe not exit like fully your part, but like to step down and to put like somebody else. I think it's important to ask you this question.
Yeah.
And to complement this, I would also say there are 2 extremes for the founders. There's the founder who absolutely wants to keep a majority of the company and is really about control. That's an extreme that we don't like. Or the founder that wants to exit the company quickly as soon as there's an opportunity. That's another extreme that's not good. I think the truth resides somewhere in the middle.
Balance, somewhere in the middle. We're lucky to have you as an healthcare expert, health sector expert. What would you consider a mature product to go to market in the health sector? How do you validate the different steps from the investor's perspective?
So health covers such a large piece of real estate that is difficult to answer generally because the mature drug product will be very different from the mature digital health or medical device product. However, there are common characteristics. So the mature product, the product that's ready to go to market, first have to pass the usual regulatory hurdles, vigilance hurdles, etc. There's a very strict regulatory regime, so that you don't have a choice, you have to go through it. Secondly, the fit to market must be studied in extreme depth. And I cannot emphasize this too little for the audience. If you are not absolutely clear who will buy your product and why they would buy it and why they will overcome their natural skepticism or conservatism, don't go to market. First, do the homework. And it's easy to underestimate how much you need to dig, how many weeks you have to follow the surgeon in the operating room to do a surgery device, how many weeks you have to live together with a prescriptor to have an expert system for prescription, etc., etc. And when I see entrepreneurs with beautiful products tell me, oh, it's good for the system, and they have a pharmacoeconomic or medico-economic calculation, the system is not your customer. Who's your customer in the system? Who will make it work?
Adoption is key, and you have to ensure that beforehand. What's your vision of the RUO, for example?
Okay, so let's take an example of a biology investigation technology, a new microscope that looks at cells in great detail. So this can be used by scientists in the lab, and it can be used in a street corner diagnostic lab. These are two categories of customers. One is called RUO, the academic who wants to fiddle with the technology and find new users and publish. And the other one is the lab technician who wants to do volume and not make mistakes. The technology will be the same. The product will be different. And that's a key message. Technology is not product. Product interface with the customer. Technology is the engine room or the building blocks. So it's not because you can do two different products with the same technology that it's easy to go from one to the other. So the RUO product will be for academics and will need to have a lot of optionality. You need to play, do different things, and that's what makes your customer happy. The same product in the diagnostic space, where the technician needs to do volume, needs to do an accurate work, needs to be absolutely failure-proof, needs to be super easy to understand, and needs to do one thing and do it well. You can't make two different products. So going from one to the other is possible if you've planned way in advance how to go from A to B. If you think it's going to be natural, you're wrong.
Do you have any advice on the strategy, not in the healthcare sector, but on the going to market strategy for the entrepreneurs?
Again, it depends really what is
very wide.
Products. But I think, so for software company, I will go to the market quickly. For hardware, you need to go to all these regulatory approval and all these single steps, which are very important. Protect also your IP with patents, which can take a bit of time. And also tech advice, be with advisors, that is very key, with mentor. So that I think it's very important.
And you mentioned the fast need for profitability these days that investors are going to be looking at. Well, thank you, both of you. Is there any final piece of advice you'd like to give to an entrepreneur who's trying to raise funds?
Give your investor a view of what the product will do for your customer. Even if you're just beginning, if you have a beautiful technology, you need to have formed for yourself as an entrepreneur a view of what it's going to be useful for and the need that it responds to. If the investor doesn't see this, it makes us very uncomfortable, whatever the beauty of the technology. And that's the difference between being an academic scientist or being an entrepreneur developing a product, is think of your customer from day one.
I would say raise money if you need money. We have seen a craziness of raising tons of money, but actually if you don't need it, I think it's totally fine. And if you really need money, choose well your partner, because actually it's going to be an investor with you for quite a few years, So it's very important to have the right partner with you.
Thank you very much.